Welcome, everyone. Welcome. I think we have everybody in now, so we can go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. I'm Christine Beach, and I have the pleasure of representing the E1 and kicking off this session today. You might not have heard of the E1 before, so let me share a bit with you. The E1, which stands for Entrepreneurs First, is a collaboration of entrepreneurial organizations throughout Southeast Minnesota, funded by a state grant through DEED's Launch Minnesota program in order to provide support to our local entrepreneurs. We do that through programming, education, connections, and mentorship. I'd encourage you to find out more about what we're doing by visiting our webpage, entrepreneursfirst.org, or by following us on our social media pages. Today, as part of our programming, we're pleased to bring you this discussion on the role and value of entrepreneurship in relation to city growth. This was initially designed as part of an in-person expo, but as with so many things, we transitioned to a virtual event. However, the good news is we still have a conference swag bag to hand out, so stay tuned and we will let you know at the end how you can get your swag bag. As we have this discussion, we're interested to know where you're coming from. To that end, you will see a poll pop up to share that information with us. So today, we have 3 parts to our event: a keynote, a panel, and breakout sessions. Our event begins today with a keynote presentation by Greg Tevin of Emerging Prairie. If you've never heard Greg speak, you're in for a treat. He's the Executive Director of Emerging Prairie, a social entrepreneur and connector of people across the Midwest. Greg's background includes co-founding Students Today, Leaders Forever, while an undergrad at the Carlson School of Management at the University of Minnesota. From there, Greg joined the Kilbourne Group and worked on a variety of projects to stimulate growth and entrepreneurship in downtown Fargo. Greg's been a leader in organizing and managing numerous entrepreneurial events in the Fargo-Moorhead area, including TEDx Fargo, Startup Weekend, and more. He has deep roots in helping leverage entrepreneurship for regional prosperity, and we look forward to hearing from him on the topic. Following his presentation, Greg will moderate a panel discussion addressing why entrepreneurship is key to the health and prosperity of a community with our panelists, Mayor Kim Norton, City Councilman Nick Campion, both of Rochester, as well as Kathy Enerson, a CETA Community Business and Development Specialist serving Eota, Preston, and Lanesboro. And last but not least, Steve Sarvey, the Winona City Manager. We are truly grateful to our panelists for taking the time to have this conversation today and share their thoughts on the topic. Thank you all for joining us. Finally, after the panel, we'll be hosting breakout room discussions with our panelists and E1 organizations. So please plan to join those discussions and bring your questions. Jamie, can we take a look at the results of our poll and see where our audience is from?
So I think the poll is now launched.
Ah, go ahead.
So we will. Sorry about that.
That's okay. All right.
It's moving fast.
Yeah. Looks like a lot of Rochester, Winona. We've got Red Wing in Austin. Some folks from the Twin Cities, Greater Minnesota. Excellent. Excellent. Well, it's thrilling to see everybody from all over the place. So thank you for doing that. So with all of that, I'm going to welcome Greg and ask Greg to take it away.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for having me. It is an absolute honor to be with you this morning from sunny Fargo, North Dakota. I'm a bit rusty, haven't had the chance to share like this, but I'm gonna try to bring some energy, bring some fun, and wonderful Mayor Norton has good body energy. She's smiling, so I'm gonna hope she laughs at all my jokes, and we'll move quickly. So I'm originally from Fargo, grew up on a family farm, had a gravel road, had my grandparents next to me growing up, and I was laughed at for this idea of being from North Dakota. I want to bring you back to 1987. The Minnesota Twins had won a World Series. My wife was born, and North Dakota was struggling. So from 1900 to 2000, North Dakota was the only state in the union of a declining population. For many of you would know, when people are traveling to 50 of 50 states, North Dakota specializes in being the 50th of 50 states. And so our community was struggling. Our small towns were leaving, and most of the elected officials were talking about a brain drain. The folks thinking about economic development were thinking about how do you keep the best and brightest. Michael Moore, the filmmaker, did a interview with our commerce and tourism director, Kevin Kramer, in the 90s, where he came and made a huge spoof about what was happening in North Dakota. Kevin Kramer is now a United States Senator. I kind of wish he would take some of those comments back. But as a young person being told the best and brightest were leaving, I was thinking to myself, well, I'm kind of good at school. I should probably leave too. And so the elected officials and the city leaders went to experts in academia. They found some professors in Princeton who had spent a lot of money on their education, couldn't get into the University of Minnesota or Mankato, so they went elsewhere. And they said, what do we do with North Dakota's population? What do we do to bring it back? And they thought, from an East Coast perspective, the best thing to do with my hometown was to create the Buffalo Commons, to bring the buffalo back to the area. And I think when we think about how we talk about our communities, there's this little thing called geographical bullying. So if I tell you I'm from Fargo, many of you will speak slower. You will ask things if we have the internet. When I travel outside the area, people will say, oh, I love Mount Rushmore. And that doesn't work. And then when you say you're from Fargo, more recently, people will go, oh, Wells Fargo, I don't use that bank anymore. And I don't think, this idea of geographical bullying is just like Fargo. So people think of teepees in the middle of nowhere. And I would also go out on a limb and guess that folks in Minnesota have that. You are guilty of geographical bullying our friends that subscribe to the idea of the Green Bay Packers, as we call them, the cheeseheads. If you went to the University of Minnesota, there's a dynamic between the St. Paul campus or the Twin Cities or the Minneapolis side. And then I'd imagine if you're from Rochester, people in the Twin Cities aren't even willing to drive that far because it's so far away and it's a small town. And if you're from Lamesboro, you probably tell people you're from Rochester, even though you're not. And so I believe my soapbox today is just to start off by saying geographical bullying needs to stop. And I think it's how we tell stories of our communities. How do we interact? How do we engage? And how do we present who we are to young people? Because as our public officials discuss the challenges and limitations of our communities, there's young people like me who listen. And then we start to internalize that. And it took me 10 years to realize I'm proud to be from North Dakota. And I've spent my second part of my career now working on that. So pre-COVID, and if you remember pre-COVID, this was a time when we went on airplanes. This was a time where we went to see our grandparents. This was when we went to sporting events, presidential rallies like you've got in Minnesota today. And that was like 6 months ago. I had this whole idea of create the community you wanted to be a part of. I didn't believe it was up to economic development, our city leadership, our states. I believed it was my responsibility to create the community I wanted to be a part of. So I spent 8 years thinking about this. And here's 5 principles that kind of stick out, and I'm going to go through these quickly. One is we have to support entrepreneurs. Statistically, jobs are created by entrepreneurs. They come in all shapes and sizes. If you think about the deep history of Minnesota and entrepreneurship, it's alive and well. And at a time, there were folks that were gathering saying, I bet we could turn this farmland into a world-class healthcare facility, or I bet we could put a little device in somebody's heart and increase their life expectancy. Or one of my favorite entrepreneurs is Jackie from Finnegan's that said, I bet I can make a for-profit beer company that's going to eradicate hunger. And somehow she gets people to pay $6 a pint to do that. I think the support of entrepreneurship is critical. I believe supporting entrepreneurship is a team sport. I think it happens in the way that we vote with our checkbooks. I believe it happens in the way we talk to people. My favorite is when I've been starting companies, people think it is their God-given responsibility to tell me all the reasons why things can't work. I don't know if you have any devil's advocates in your life, but I've got a lot of them around me. Some were the ones that created me. And what I've realized, if you're J.K. Rowling and you're trying to write a book and people ask you, well, what if it doesn't work? How are you going to pay for your kids' food as a single mom? People weren't asking her, what if it becomes a multi-billion-dollar enterprise? What if Disney World wants to have rides based on your characters? I think the types of questions we ask entrepreneurs are critical. And I would challenge you to resist being a devil's advocate and an advocate. Advocating for these folks. What if they strike it big? What if they outgrow their space? What if they have to move their operations to another environment because there's so much growth? I believe supporting entrepreneurs is critical. Second thing, I think we have to educate our communities. The jobs of tomorrow don't exist today. We have to create the environment for people to learn. I think it takes a community approach. How do we prepare communities to adopt and to learn Bitcoin, artificial intelligence, digital currencies? How is this going to shape the way we live? I know for me, we've spent a lot of our time educating folks on the intersection of technology and opportunity. The third area is to build on our bright spots. We are not going to be the next Waynesboro, although I believe you have a Zambros as well. We're not going to be the next Rochester and Fargo. We're not going to be the next Boulder, Colorado. I'm not sure we want to be the next Austin. We want to be the first Fargo. And what that means for us is to look at our environment. What are the special things and activities? And how do we celebrate the people that make those possible? How do we take what is and build upon it versus this idea of talking about, well, we're not the Twin Cities and we didn't get $900 million in federal funding for the light rail, or we're not this or we're not that. How do we build on our bright spots? Another thing we've learned is to infuse the arts. We believe entrepreneurs drive our economy, but our artists drive our culture. And so for our tech events, we have them in arts venues. And we find that people from out of town, they're not interested in coming to ballrooms. They're not interested in going to chain restaurants. Fargo's got 5 Applebee's. Pretty sweet. I'm going to guess none of you are going to want to go to Applebee's in Fargo. However, you might be interested in going to Mezzaluna, a unique dining experience, or Marge's Bar, which seats 8 people at a time and serves hot dish. The culinary creativity, the musical, all the arts, that's the specialness that makes this possible. I intentionally have a real background in this image. It's from a graffiti artist that designed our conference room. I can't say I would have approved it, not sure I like it, but it creates a unique sense of place. And I think the more that we can support our artists is important. On a kind of soapbox element, I also think it's important to spend money with the artists. And I also think it's important to be mindful of mental health, especially in this environment. These are folks that gives us glimpses into the future, and yet often there's a challenge in that environment. And so I want to encourage all of you, the next time you're going to hire an artist, don't offer them exposure, offer them a paycheck and pay a little bit more than you think you should, because these are the folks that make our homes, communities special and magical. And the last is radical inclusivity. I would just be really transparent that this has been one I used to think about as creating vegan food options and having babysitters available for families with young kids, reducing price points. But I think for all of us, we have a responsibility to think about our nation and think about the events in the Twin Cities and beyond of what does inclusivity look like? Who's at the table? Who gets to be heard? How we think about voices. Our organization is going through a transformation on that as we continue to think about how do we support underrepresented entrepreneurs and founders that may not call themselves an entrepreneur, but they own a facility or they're starting something, and they may not have the vernacular that I grew up with as a farm kid that went to the University of Minnesota, because they might be from the south side of Chicago and they may only have 2 years of high school under their belt, but they're in our community. And I think we have to think deep and hard about power, about dynamics. So going into COVID, we were rocking and rolling. March 4th, we launched an innovation platform, 25 million media impressions. The governor is excited. We got the buildings filling up, co-working spaces coming downtown, out of town folks from exotic places like Illinois versus just Minnesota and South Dakota coming to visit. And then COVID hit. And I think we all know that that's been a challenge. And so I want to dive into 4 ways I want to encourage you to think about responding and building in this new environment in a way that for some this is challenging, and yet for others it's an absolutely incredible experience. So the first is to declare a major, and it's a modern major. For us, that looked like Barry Batchelor, a serial entrepreneur. His mom was a rockette. His dad was a drunk. He grew up on the streets of New York. He came to North Dakota State University because of education, and he stayed because of opportunities in entrepreneurship. He asked a room filled with our folks in pre-COVID, what's our community's major? And then he said, what could I drive my granddaughters? And he has 3 beautiful granddaughters. What could I drive them around our region and say we did together? What is the collected assets of Fargo, Moorhead, Dilworth, West Fargo, and Horace? And what could we as a group do to make a difference with the world? It led to us pursuing a path of the Grand Farm. The photo is a group of folks that said, we believe we can power the first ever 100% autonomous farm. This has led to a series of activities where 40 acres of land was given. Yesterday, we had 35 healthcare executives on site talking about the impact of rural America healthcare as it relates to agriculture activity. It's led to us bringing a innovation platform called Plug and Play to the region, a collaboration between our universities, academia, and the startup community, and access to capital. And what I love about this project is nobody in that picture, from our head of commerce to entrepreneurs to academia, could do it alone. And by challenging ourselves to ask, what's our region's major? What can we do to improve the human condition together? The goal is so broad and so big. We had 1% of the project done before we went public, and now farmers and professors from around the world are engaging in the project, and we have true momentum. I'd also encourage you to think about giving yourself permission to build the plane while you are flying. On March 11th, we were scheduled to have a conversation with North Dakota's Career and Technical Education Department that loves North Dakota Century Code. And we were introducing North Dakota's first accelerated learning boot camp. And we were scheduled to have the board decide on that day if we could have a code school. That meeting was delayed. COVID hit, schools shut down, and 2 weeks later, we got permission to have North Dakota's first software development school. Now, through our partnership with Prime Digital Academy in the Twin Cities, where we license their curriculum, we launched our first cohort of students, 13 students. We have North Dakota's first income share agreement, where these students defer their $15,000 enrollment and pay upon completion of their program and their job status. These 13 students have entered the workforce. And last night I got a text that one of the students who had a homeschool experience, is 19 years old, just got offered a job at $55,000 with full benefits. These students responded in the COVID environment. It turns out that working remotely is going to be a thing. And if you have to work remotely, learning remotely is a thing. And so we have our second cohort active. We're going to be well on our way to our thirds. And we've given ourselves to build the plane while we were flying. We don't have finalized plans. What the hell's a plan now? The worst investment of 2019 was definitely a planner. We're giving ourselves permission to be agile and to build the plane while we were flying it. The third area comes to us from a conversation with the head of innovation at Marvin Windows. He said to us in a conversation, for every hour of offense or of defense our company is playing, we're challenging ourselves to play an hour of offense. And he said that when we take the defense off the field and we allow the offense on the field, we give our defense time to rest. I think all of our communities have to think about in offense and in defense. Where can we be aggressive? And yet, where do we need to be patient? I know for our organization, it's challenged us to rethink our internal systems. How do we hire folks that represent our community? It allows us to think bigger about the future. And by playing offense, we are now creating new opportunities. And although there's challenges in the COVID environment, we found a tremendous amount of opportunity to collaborate. Turns out everybody in the world's available for a meeting. And we found a lot of time with folks. It's amazing who you can engage with if you reach out and bring into your community. The last thing, and this really goes back to the heart of every entrepreneurial ecosystem, is give, give, give. This is a photo of Simi, one of our new American entrepreneurs. We met her when she was working at a school as a lunch lady. We found her serving meals at a farmer's market and said, what would it look like if we supported you on your entrepreneurial journey? She just opened her storefront. She's got 3 friends that are looking at starting businesses, and she's somebody whose voice is now being heard in our community. I think for everyone that believes in entrepreneurship, that wants to support our economies, that believes that communities matter, it is a generosity game. And I believe that the more we give, the more value we can create. It's less about who gets the credit. It's less about who's in front. And it's about the idea of, I think President Truman said, you can accomplish anything you want in the world if you don't care who gets credit. A practice we have at our organization is to give our wins away. And so if you tie that all up together, I believe the prevailing winners in a post-COVID environment of communities all across the upper Midwest is going to be based on unconventional wisdom. I think we need to find time to listen to our weirdos, our creatives, and our dreamers. I think it's about engaging with the folks that when someone from out of town comes that we want to show off, we bring to them. Let's support those folks. I think of one of my favorite weirdos in Regent, North Dakota, who was a high school principal that said, people aren't coming to my community, but I'm going to create the world's largest metal sculpture and call it the Enchanted Highway, and people come to my community. And he did it. And he did it with creativity and energy. I think when we need to look at the post-COVID world, we need to listen to the weirdos. We need to take time for the creatives, and we need to let the dreamers have the space to create. A temptation we all have is to ask, who's gonna fund it? How are we gonna do it? Let's resist those urges. Let's follow these instincts and allow these people to drive our communities forward. Today I met with my staff. We met outside. We talked about the last 6 months, and we look forward to the next 6 months. I asked them to reflect and to share their hopes. And we realized it might be the last time we come together in person for coming months. But we told stories of our community coming together to support one another. And it is my firm belief that each and every one of us cannot outgive our communities. By being generous, by sharing our time, our talents, and our resources, good things happen to us naturally. And when I think of the regions that you represent, I'm filled with wonder, I'm filled with hope, I'm filled with gratitude, because I've vacationed in your communities, I've benefited from the medical care you've provided, but I've also benefited from the hospitality and generosity of the people that fill up your churches on Sunday, that volunteer on the weekends when nobody's watching. I think our part of the country is filled with the best of humanity. And in times of challenge, we have that. Those are the same folks that can start things. They're the problem solvers, the tinkerers, the ones that say somebody's sick and I'm throwing a benefit. All of those community skills are entrepreneurial skills. So it's my belief that the Midwest is filled with people that have all the values that are prepared to start companies and support our economy. So with that, I give thanks. I welcome you all to the great state of North Dakota, and I look forward to spending the rest of the afternoon or the session with you.
Wow. We should give you a virtual round of applause, Greg. That was really, truly very inspirational. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. We thank you for your thoughts, your experience. I have to tell you, I thought it was really thought-provoking. We can take away some ideas for how we can build the plane while we fly it. I like the ideas around declaring a major and building on our bright spots. These are thoughtful ways to consider the topic of valuing and growing what's unique about each of our communities. Okay, we're going to take a short 3-minute pause as we get ready to transition to a panel format. This is a great time for a bio break before we continue our session. So stay tuned.
Hi, Christine. This is Nick. I just wanted to do a quick mic check. Can you hear me?
Hey, Nick. Yes, I can.
Perfect. Thank you.
Will join us via video as well?
Yep, I'll be on video. I'm going to do a quick bio break. I'll be right back.
Okay.
All right. Hi, this is Jamie. If we could get our panelists up, and then Greg, if you're there, could you stop sharing your screen, if possible?
Greg is going to be back in just a second.
Turns out I have the power to do that.
Oh, okay, there you go. I think as soon as we get Greg back, Steve, do we have you on video? Yes, we do. Okay.
Yep, I'm here.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Well, I think if we have everyone except for Greg, I'm going to take this opportunity to remind folks that at the end of our session today, we are going to have a swag bag that we're passing out. So please stay on and we'll tell you how you can get that at the end of the session. And I have adequately filled the time. Greg is back. So welcome back, everyone. We're going to transition now to our panel discussion. Greg is going to moderate that discussion, so I'm going to turn it back over to Greg.
Well, thank you. And, I'll switch my hat and go into the role of panel moderator. So it's an honor today to have 4 distinguished panelists. They have a wide variety of background. I think you'll be intrigued and inspired by their commitment to their communities, their desire to improve the world for others, and hopefully a bit of humor. So we're all looking for one good laugh from each of them. As we think about entrepreneurship, I'm going to kick it off with Mayor Norton, has the honor of serving the community in Rochester. Mayor Norton, just to kick it off with you, I think there's a lot of global attention around the Mayo Clinic. Even yesterday, I heard a presentation where they were talking about the impact of the innovation within Mayo. But could you just kick things off and share a little bit about, the impact around innovation and entrepreneurship at Mayo, but then what other activities are happening in your region beyond just the activity at the Mayo Clinic?
So thank you for that. And it's a pleasure to be here. We have a lot going on in our community. And I think it's worth noting that Mayo Clinic itself started because the Mayo brothers were entrepreneurs. They saw an opportunity, they had the energy, flexibility, problem-solving skills that entrepreneurs have, and they took that opportunity to start the clinic. And I would say, in addition to that, we also been blessed with having a strong IBM presence, and that's also added to kind of the health and biotech attitude that we have in our community, and really now we are moving beyond that, as you're saying. We have Mayo Clinic, we have the technology, the blend of that into the biotech industry is where the entrepreneurs are really growing and thriving. We also are working a lot on including arts into our community, not only in our development, but have been really proactive in using our entrepreneurs in a new way as we design our DMC growth around Mayo Clinic and that health technology environment with co-design opportunities. So we're using members of our community as co-designers on what should Discovery Walk look like, what should our Heart of the City look like, and not only what does it look like, but how do we interact with that as community members and businesses so that it meets all the needs of our very diverse and growing community. So I would say just the synergies that happen between entrepreneurs, some of whom were, they're growing out of this now, but some of whom were former IBM employees that really meshed with that healthcare industry to create new and innovative ideas. So just top of mind, those are a few thoughts I have, and we can talk further about the rest of what's happening in our community as we go.
We'll continue to dive in. I do want to bring your colleague, Councilman Campion, Nick, up onto the panel now, if we could. Nick, you've got a background in technology. You've watched entrepreneurs in your region. What are you excited about right now with the activity and the energy? Bring us into some of those bright spots that we talked about earlier today that you're seeing.
Yeah, so I'm really thrilled to be here talking about entrepreneurship and small business. I think it's like such a critical time for us to be having that conversation as we look to maybe restart or reignite some of the success we were having pre-COVID, which I think was a really good kind of undertone to the keynote. What got me started in technology was in Rochester. We have a really big IBM facility, and they used to have every year a huge Ferris wheel that they would set up for all the employees to bring their families out to like a fair. And I would drive by and I was super jealous about that. Was the IBM plant's kind of family activity where they bring all the families in. So that was really what got me interested in technology. And then, the nice part about being in Rochester is the Mayo Clinic has just really buoyed a lot of bringing smart, intelligent, and driven people to the region. And I think, as someone that looks to be innovative and to bring new ideas to the table, that ecosystem is the lifeblood. The people that you get here are going to be what drives your ability to be innovative and to continue to spawn new businesses and new products. I think I see several kind of people I've worked with throughout our community on the phone, and I think they would hopefully echo that the sorts of people that move to the Midwest tend to be hardy, which is great. But I think the beacon of having kind of that technology and biotech and biology center of competence here has really been, not only do we get the hardiness of people that are willing to be gritty and kind of do the work, we also get that skill set that is exceptionally skilled. And I think that to me has really been what's going on. I continue to see efforts that we're doing with the Destination Medical Center and generally our overall kind of like city building experience really being about how do we continue to keep innovative people wanting to make Rochester home. So that is, a big part for me. We obviously have tons of programs, but I always kind of try and put that lens on of we're competing. I think that's the big thing for me is whether it's North or South Dakota or it's Iowa and Wisconsin, like killer universities, places we compete with all the time to try and get those same people making Rochester home. So while it's competitive, it's also that kind of system that drives our economies and our regional success. So that's where I see us at today.
Well, let's come back. I think you planted a seed, a role of communities and innovation, and let's put that in the parking lot for a few minutes as we introduce Kathy and Steve. But let's come back to that and let's think about this role of innovation around communities of different sizes, different backgrounds, different skill sets, and what we as a region might be able to do together. Kathy, I want to bring you up. You have a unique background. You have a unique perspective. I think when we think about entrepreneurship in some of our communities of less population, oftentimes we talk about small businesses, and I've been to your communities, and I think some of them are some of the places I would love to raise my kids. Help us understand what's special about these three communities you get to represent, and how are you supporting these folks in their entrepreneurial journeys and ventures? Kathy, are you with us?
I sure am. I was muted.
Hey!
So, Greg, I'm glad you visited. That's wonderful to hear. You've got a good perspective. So you nailed it. Rural America does have the best of humanity. And I have to say for Nick and Kim, Rochester has always been a small town. It has just grown into a big city. The people there still have their hearts in small towns. And what I would say is special in what we do, first of all, to kind of share something funny, Nick, I came from New York. I was one of those people brought here because of IBM, and we did have 2 recreational facilities in New York. And I know my friends were jealous that we could go to the pool on the weekends and hang out at the IBM club. And when I came here, it was different, but yes, they still did have a picnic and a Ferris wheel. And so it did make the company look special. And what makes rural America or my small towns look special, not only is it the people, but how they host you when they come into a community and how they pull together as businesses. And I can watch that in the chambers as well. And I appreciate the Rochester Chamber too. They do reach out beyond just the city of Rochester. Kathleen does a great job at that. And one of the things I would say is special is that through our small communities, we can collaborate really well. We can take a break with the same police officer, with the same utilities, with the same ambulance, and we can reach out to each other very easily. And so, as you know, building in Fargo, collaboration amongst the other groups is really important. And it's important for our entrepreneurs to belong to some associations and organizations that help. For instance, we have HRAs, we have EDAs, we have chambers, and then we have organizations beyond that they belong to. And I do have an entrepreneur background myself, so I think I can relate well to them. I've watched accounts receivable and people not pay their bills. I've watched, I've belonged to associations. So at first I had a pick your own berry farm until I was 30, and the Minnesota Grown, that association was really important to me, as well as the University of Minnesota Extension Office walking me through doing something that I'd never done before. I've had my real estate license since college. And so belonging to the Rochester, Southeast Minnesota Realtors Association is important to my growth, and I can't do everything alone. So it goes right back to that collaboration. And even the lumberyard that we had, my husband belonged to the Rochester area builders, and those associations help us build upon what we know. And for entrepreneurs, I'm excited that you have E1 coming along, because that collaboration will help our small businesses in our rural communities.
Well, thank you for that, Matthew. Would like to now bring in Steve. Steve, based on your bio, you're a bit of a journeyman. You've been elected mayor. You serve as city administrator. You've served in the military. Steve, one of the questions we threw out to all of you is, what's the role of a civic leader in supporting entrepreneurs? So you've been involved in this public sector space, it seems like your whole career, and thank you for your service. But what do you think when you think about the best elected officials around the world? What have they done well to support entrepreneurs?
Thanks, Greg, and it's an honor to be here. I spent some time in Fargo with the National Guard doing flood duty.
Oh, 97, 2000, what year?
You know, the years kind of run together. I think it was like 2006 or 7, something like that.
Yeah, good. Well, thanks to the support of Minnesota, we hope to have a diversion as well, but let's leave the politics aside and let's get back to talking about community.
Yeah, my first experience really was, my first city administrator job was in Lanesboro back about 100 years ago. And folks down there really weren't sure that this rail conversion to a bike trail was actually going to work. You know, were people really going to come down from the cities and ride their bikes or come over from Chicago? It was still sort of an unknown thing at the time. And it was interesting to watch, because as it became successful, the people I think that really benefited, there were a few that were local, but most were investors from the cities and outside of the Lanesboro area. And I think that was instructive to me, because the transformation was happening right in front of our face, but other people were the ones that were generally going to be benefiting from that. And so I think it's really important for community leaders to keep an ear to the ground, to understand what's happening, but also to have that forward looking. And I think, as you brought up, you know, listening to the dreamers, listening to those odd folks, listening to the artists, because they're on the cutting edge, and to see if coalitions can be built around what's really coming down the pike. A lot of what you said really resonated with me, Greg, because I read a book by Brad Feld called Startup Communities. And he talks a lot about Boulder there, and also outside of Boston, and the ecosystems that communities have established to support entrepreneurs, and then the responsibility that entrepreneurs have once they've made it to help others. And so it's, you know, I take that book to heart, and that's the kind of community that we're trying to build here in Winona. And I think others that are being successful are doing the same thing, whether they know it or not. And so, you know, community involvement is really important. A lot of times entrepreneurs want to say the government just needs to get out of the way. I find more partnership is actually better. And knowing where you can apply the resources that we have as a community, and then when to get out of the way when the entrepreneur is really taking off, and help set those conditions is really vitally important.
So let's build off Steve's comments and bring some of Nick's message back. One thing that all of us in the panel have in common is most of the world would describe us as rural. But it's interesting, Fargo is the big city in North Dakota, but to the rest of the world, we're a third tier, fourth tier, non-existent tier. We are trying to get the Olympics in 2087, but we haven't had any luck there. But when I think about the communities that each of you on the panel represent, you actually benefit from each other, whether you're a trailing spouse, whether you're a child, recreation. When you think about the role of innovation, and if you could dream of ways that you could collaborate what are some of the things that you're thinking about how you as public sector leaders can support the region as a whole and each other's community as we think about innovation, entrepreneurship? I'd like to think about arts and humanity, the role internet and connectivity play. How do you think about each other, and how does your ability to collaborate potentially drive innovation and support entrepreneurs?
How do you want to do this? Do you just want us to speak up?
This is the part where we go a little off script, and we
I'd like to recommend the mayor start.
yeah.
Oh, good. I had to do that before. I think one of the roles of leadership is in convening and collaborating, bringing people together, including the arts, being that role model, if you will. And again, you know, cities have a role. I loved what Steve just said a little bit ago. Cities do have a role, and we do also need to know when to get out of the way. But our ability and willingness to bring people together, to support just this idea of failing fast, allowing people to try new things, let them try it, and then support them in the, if it doesn't work, support them in, okay, we're gonna you know, turn the wheel and try something different, or we're gonna start over. And I think post-COVID, we have a real role to play in bringing people together, whether they be to fill malls that are dying right now, or businesses that will fail during the next, unfortunately, the next months, to help jumpstart new businesses by supporting our entrepreneurs. And that's something I think we can do as leaders.
I think that a regional approach is really what's necessary, because we're competing for talented people, and we're competing with cities like Chicago, Seattle, I mean, even around the world. And so as a regional approach, to show folks that maybe you want to settle here in Winona, but the trailing spouse is going to work at Mayo in Rochester. It's not a loss, it's a win if the region you know, operates that way. We should certainly all gang up on the cross. I don't think any of us have a problem with that. But
whoa, this is a no geographical bullying zone.
Oh,
there,
come
Steve.
on, just a little bit. But no, really, I think that the more that community leaders talk to each other and understand what resources each community has, the more that we can talk to businesses about buying from other businesses in the region to fulfill their resource needs as well throughout the region, rather than automatically looking overseas for fulfillment. We can do that regionally. We really build this area up, and I think strengthen it, you know, to the outside world.
I would definitely support everything you said about lacrosse, and then add that
Hey, we're going to start finding you all. We're going to start, I don't know, maybe the mayor can just put a little $3 ticket on your
right. That's right. I would say the part that really struck me is that idea of like picking a major. And I would say I would take a little bit different spin on that. I would say like our region's going to have a major, but we're kind of already pre-med, and we're looking for something to supplement that. Like I think if we look at our economic activity, if we look at what drives us, like through and through, we're always going to have this strong thread of biology and healthcare and all the supporting service around that. And I think what we have to do is be smart about intelligent crossovers that happen. So maybe I'm going to call that picking a minor. I like your mental model there, but we're going to maybe pick a couple of minors that are going to be like nice and directly off of those. So I've heard of a lot of like biotech crossover with ag tech. Like to me, that is a great way for us to bring some of the people that are feeling left behind by some of the technology changes that happen, and especially about like the urban rural divide that has been a real challenge for Minnesota, frankly, to conquer, is like starting to find those ways where we can get that bi-directional knowledge share going. So I spent my first 2 years on the council learning about new agricultural techniques that are low till. Sorry, I'm trying to search back 3 years ago. But those kind of low till technologies, that sort of stuff that then breeds new innovation. Like, I really like that because it starts to say, like, our problems aren't just Rochester's, right? Like, the sorts of problems that affect Pine Island, that affect Casson, they start to cause regional problems. And so we address them more as, how do we innovate together in those spaces? How do we bring the the university we have in Rochester, the university we have in Winona, how do we bring all of those bright minds together around those kind of real salt of the earth kind of problems? That, to me, then really starts to be a foundation we can fix a lot of fronts on, which, as much as entrepreneurship is definitely something we want to encourage, like, I take a much bigger perspective on trying to solve our modern challenge of government and of society. So I think it is a really key aspect, and I love that kind of mental model about how do we pick things that we can really spur that collaboration on with.
So I'm gonna, if you want to jump in quick, I'm just watching time. If you want to go,
Yeah.
Otherwise we'll jump to the community questions.
Just really quickly, I would like to mention that we do have to, at the EDA level, we are introducing economic tools, different education programs. And we started down that journey with Journey to Growth with DMC, and we need to continue to maximize telling our story, creating innovation, which I think that E1 will really help us with. For those of you that have not participated in the Rural Entrepreneur Venture, it's really fun for us in Lanesboro to have begun that journey and develop an economic development authority and have that clean slate to then build upon the talents. I'm kind of curious how, as a region, we can bring both our universities, which we do some of that through education, and our technical colleges right deep into the bowels of our little communities and have hands-on work with that. And I'm kind of excited to look at how that can be done, and then to continue to provide the startup capital, because entrepreneurs are really going out there on a leap of faith, and they don't have a lot of funds to work with. And so how we maximize bringing capital to them will be an exciting opportunity. And we have to do that regionally. We can't, like, back to what Kim and Steve said, we won't be able to do that individually. We have some great studies of Southeast Minnesota, what we do need to build up in our assets from childcare and housing and beyond. And as we continue to do that, I think that's what you said. We need to have a major. We need to stay focused on those, not chase every shiny penny, and work hard at that.
No, thanks for that, Kathy. I want to go to the audience questions that are coming to us via the chat feature. And I'm going to give you panelists up to 3 words to answer each of these questions. So up to 3 words. The mayor has agreed to do fines for all of you that go beyond. But the first one comes from Mark. What do we have in common, and what are the resources, bright spots we can build on? What do we have in common? Second question, what are the resources, the bright spots that we can build upon? And Mayor, you get to pick who goes first. So you don't have to go first, but you get to pick who goes first. Since
well, Nick's ready. I can see he knows I'm going to pick on him. Come on, look, he turned his light off. Get on there, Nick.
I'm not using my 3 words yet. Could you, what was the prompt is, what do we have in common and what can we work on together?
Yeah, what do you have in common, and then where are the bright spots to continue to build on?
Shared needs and history. It's like an ampersand. So that, I mean, I would say that's, for me, what we have together and what we need to work on. Our history of working together hasn't always been so great, and I think, like, new leadership all over the place and new world order after COVID is certainly giving us a good opportunity to kind of rethink what we've had historically. So I would say let's take that as kind of a reset and look for ways to move forward together.
Do I get to give him a grade for 3 words?
No, because we only got 4 more minutes and I got one more question.
All right, go.
Steve?
Well, I would say shared opportunities.
Kathy?
I'd say we all have our unique story to tell.
And then the mayor.
Great people and collaborate.
All right, so I'm going to just pull up some of the questions in chat, and we're not going to get to these, but I just want to honor that they're there. How do we overcome the build it and they will come challenge? How do we really find entrepreneurs, make it easy for them to find our communities, and engage meaningfully? Another question comes about the entrepreneurial mindset. How can we let the innovators, those that aren't necessarily in high tech, high growth spots, see themselves as entrepreneurs and founders? Also, what can we do for our young people? It's been studied that folks that start lemonade stands are more likely to start other things. How do we engage that entrepreneurial experience in the younger generations? I will leave you with those questions to ponder. There's a series of folks in the chat, but I'm gonna reserve the right to ask the final question, which is, today, in this, I think it's today, the President of the United States is in Minnesota, and a presidential candidate is in Minnesota. What would each of you ask and tell them? So what would you tell each of them that is special about your community? And what would you ask of them on how they could support entrepreneurs, both in Minnesota and beyond? So what would you celebrate your community if you had that one sentence ability to talk to each of them? And what would you ask of them to support entrepreneurs, innovators in Minnesota and beyond? And who knows, maybe some of you get to hang out with them today. I don't know your party affiliations. I don't know how this all works, but it's a big day in Minnesota.
I'll go first since I'm ready. I would say the thing that's exceptional about us is our dedication to people who are hurting. And that to me is a real exception of Rochester, is just the culture here about healing. And I would say what they could do is continue to make investments in cities that are targeted at supporting the small businesses, and take away some of the handcuffs they've put on us with how we distribute funding and how we can be supportive. Because I do believe we have a role to play. I think that role to me looks a lot like getting resources and building places people want to live and work.
I'd like to jump in with, if I got to meet any of the president or the candidates, I would like to inform them about the community engagement scores that we have in our small communities. They're as high as 90% with community engagement. And so we do have the brightest and best in these rural communities. And we have people that retire as well that decide to either go home or go back to their rural communities. And we also have that brain game in our rural communities. We do have a wonderful community engagement with the brightest and best. That's what really makes it special.
I would brag about the diversity of our local economy. I think that's not unique necessarily to Winona, but Rochester too, and a lot of the small communities here. And then I would just ask them to really help to tamp down the division amongst people in this nation, and certainly here in the state. If we can stop seeing each other, the way that it's being portrayed, I think we can get a lot more done. We can certainly collaborate because we can start to trust one another.
Greg, I guess I'll add for support. I think that we have to think beyond Minnesota, beyond Fargo, beyond Wisconsin. We have to think about how can we engage the percentage of people that are unemployed right now to come to our area. And again, we have to do that collaboratively, and we have to be able to reach out. Greg, if you're a Carlson School of Minnesota graduate, do you know of one perhaps that's in California or Texas right now that could be doing sort of what you're doing and presenting opportunities in other areas of the United States? I think that, along with making it easier for people that come to visit to become entrepreneurs and develop their specialties. Right now, it's very difficult if you came as a student from another country, then to go ahead and get your green card or your visa to work, and just to make that a little bit more streamlined so that we can engage them. And I'd love to put the people in the technical schools and the universities hands-on into our rural communities, either to take on the succession of a business or to maybe come back in 5 years to open their own.
Mayor, are you ready?
Yeah, I would just say, I would answer probably a little closer to Steve's. I think we have hardy, hardworking, innovative people that live in this part of the country. And we need to be empowered, and we need to not be divided. We need to be drawn together. We just we have to do that. And particularly in this part of the state where we have such a strong ag presence, it is breaking my heart to see us losing some ag industry in Rochester. I want to grow that. As Nick mentioned, with all the great technology, with health as a focus and healthcare and health innovation as a focus, there's a role for ag in that. And we just need to pull together and stop the division. And the other component to that would be perhaps letting us work with education. We have this incubator EDU that's starting in Rochester, and I think we need to grow that incubation and entrepreneur spirit, starting with our high school kids, and build it into, in fact, I would say all curriculum, high school up through college, and no matter what you're majoring in, and that would be helpful.
Well, appreciate all those comments. We've got a little budding energy around the topic of supporting underrepresented entrepreneurs, diverse entrepreneurs, perspectives, backgrounds, minority-owned, female. Maybe bring us into, if each of you could bring us into your thinking around those topics. How are you starting to wrap your head around your roles to support underrepresented entrepreneurs? How are you thinking about that? And Mayor, since you're on my screen, maybe you could kick us off, but we know diversity matters. We know diversity adds richness, culture, perspective, but it's a tense topic. Maybe you could bring us into how you and your team is starting to think about that.
Absolutely it is. And a couple things, because of our Destination Medical Center initiative, we have had some opportunity that it probably has been helpful. As part of the DMC, we have a state mandate saying we need to reach a certain percentage of women and minority-owned businesses. So we are focusing and have been focusing on that. And we are now to the point where we are building that beyond just the DMC growth, that we're going to do that more on all of our projects. That'll be just something that we expect in the development. And also, I mentioned earlier this co-designing. When we do co-designing, we bring people from different cultures, socioeconomic, racial backgrounds into the design process. What do we need to make this community welcoming and open and right for all of you? How do we create a term I learned at an event a number of years ago, a cosmopolitan canopy, where everybody feels like the design is for them? How do we do that? And by bringing community members in, minority members as well, they then stay as part of that co-design process for the long term of the project, which is also starting to open the door for minority-owned businesses to grow and develop and realize we have a place for them in our community. So those are just a couple quick examples.
Greg, one of the things that you do as an EDA director is that you want to cultivate your existing businesses along with attracting new. And so I think this is a delicate subject. I really appreciate the work that's being done, being born in the 60s and being a woman. So I can only imagine that the folks that have other diversity issues, whether it be age, disabilities, or ethnic backgrounds, appreciate the same. But I do think that as well as building up the new, we also have to create fair and wonderful services for the existing. So it's a delicate balance there, but there's a need, and it's been an ongoing need for years to do this. So the resources that are currently being that are out there to help us with this, I think that we just continue to utilize those, build upon them, and then create a fair education and access to capital for all people as well. So it is a very delicate balance, Greg.
Great. Maybe Steve or Nick, you could share how you're thinking about this topic. And for those that, if you could just look through the chat, there's some activity in chat as far as opportunities, consideration, perspectives as well. So if maybe Steve or Nick, you wanted to jump in.
When Winona joined with Project Find a few years ago and became the first Welcoming America city in Minnesota. And we've seen that grow, but the tools that organization provides is helping us to really take a look at who we are as a community and how we can do better to welcome folks here. I think that's probably the first step that needs to be done. And as Kathy said, how we treat existing entrepreneurs, I think, is going to be attractive to others who want to come here as well. Working with other partners like the Initiative Foundation, working with our 2 universities and our community college, where there are folks, minority folks that are students there, to try to get them into the community and get them out of the classroom. Will Kitchens is doing a great job with that as well. And our entrepreneur space downtown, the Garage. The more we can get people into the community as students, I think the more they'll find themselves invested in Winona or in the region, and they'll be likely to start up a business. How we support them with that ecosystem, I think that's the next challenge for us, to make sure that we're firing on all cylinders so that they really do feel supported. If they launch and they take off, great. If they're not, and we could do a quick termination and help them move on to something else, all the better.
And maybe to quickly just get my thoughts in there, I think intentionality matters. If you're trying to accomplish these inclusive policies, like, you have to set out to do it. It's not just going to happen by accident. And so, I have so many life philosophies, it's hard to keep them all sorted, but you are what you measure. So we've really taken on a measuring exercise with all of our projects to say, we brought in a new position to say, what are we doing across our projects? How many people, women and minority enterprises are getting incorporated into what we're trying to accomplish as a community? And I think until you measure it, you don't know where your starting point is, and it's hard to qualify success. And I'd say that, finally, I'll try and close out. I have a lot of thoughts on this. The historic way that small business has been kept out of government contracts is because they're too big to bid at once. And so there's an effort underway, and I mentioned this in the chat, but to break our contracts up so they're smaller pieces so that they can be bid on by multiple small businesses, because that makes it a little bit more manageable and also mitigates the government's risk for having some, $30 million project go to a startup is a lot different than having a $30,000 project go to a new startup. Those sorts of just real practical changes will make it much easier for women and minority-owned businesses to win and to keep government contracts, and that is an important lifeline to lots of types of work. So those are kind of, I think, the low-hanging fruit we've taken on. There's a lot of bigger strategic objectives we're trying to also conquer, but might need a full hour to describe all those.
Well, thank you all for being willing to think about those very, very important topics. As we wrap up the panel today, I just want to say thanks to the panelists. I do want to challenge everyone on the call to think about unlikely partnerships and unintended positive consequences. Our work on declaring a major of the Grand Farm has led to research partnerships with the UK and Calgary. It's led to a potential a potential landlord of the Fargo-Moorhead diversion, which just this week has brought innovation collaboration opportunities with the Department of Transportation and Northern Plains Test Site. It's surprising to me how unlikely folks can bring apart projects that allow us to collaborate in meaningful ways. So I would challenge you to continue to think about what could the region do together? What could a shoe company and a healthcare system and world-class hospitality do to improve the human condition? The time is now, the time is ours. This is not our practice life, and I would encourage you to keep playing offense. The values of the region are what the world needs, and I would thank you for that. Thanks for the panelists, and I'm going to bounce pass it over to Christine and continue on with the conference.
Thank you all for a wonderful array of thoughts and insights. That was really a great way to think about how we can leverage what we have and then attract and support entrepreneurs to create growth. So, well, I'm just going to close us out then and say thanks for joining us today. We hope you found this session valuable. You will receive a survey soon, and we'd be really grateful if you would fill that out and give us your feedback. And that's where you'll get your swag bag, because in there you'll tell us where to send it. So look for that and help us out by completing it. And then by doing that, you'll really help us shape how we can serve our communities better going forward. So I want to thank you again for your time today. I know everybody's on to their next Zoom meeting. So have a great weekend, stay safe, and thank you. And please let us know if there's anything we can do for you.